I look at social media and I relate it to a refrigerator. If you open social media, you open a refrigerator, you get to choose what you take out. You can either take the apple, you can take a piece of cake. It's your choice, right? So there is a good way to use social media. And the way the algorithm works, which is very smart, they sometimes use it to their advantage, but the things you like, the things you see or rewatch or comment on or share or send, that stuff now you see more of it on your feed. So if I were to like something positive with mental health, motivational speakers, or whatever the case may be, I would now see more of that. It's kind of how our mind works.
All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Girls Gone Gritty. I'm here, Jennifer Berenius, with my friends Farley and Darian, and we are blessed and honored to have the wonderful Teddy Sourlis, who is representing an amazing organization that he started, MensXMental. And we can't wait to just dive deep into the conversations that need to happen that you've started with your organization. So, Teddy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. First and foremost, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. But born and raised in Rumson, New Jersey. I'm 24 years old and graduated from Babson College 2 years ago. Dealt with some hardships throughout the course and the journey, but it's no accident I'm here, and I believe I've found my purpose and my reason for still being here.
Things happen for a reason, always in life. What do you think is your reason and your history, how you started your foundation?
Were you an athlete at Babson?
Yes,
Okay.
I played 4 years of college basketball there.
Of course, I knew that, but I didn't think our listeners knew that.
Yeah,
because that's a very important piece.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And part of, what we talk about within our organization is being more than an athlete. So my entire life, I was only Teddy Sourlis, the basketball player. It was my definition. It was my lifestyle. But then I got hurt my freshman and sophomore year. I had back-to-back hip labrum surgeries, and I was completely forced into a position of finding out who else I was, who I was beyond basketball. And it was a really difficult time. And I think a lot of athletes struggle with that identity piece of only being an athlete, and we are just so much more than that.
And it's hard when you say injuries. Injuries, you can either make or break a career.
Absolutely.
Injuries, you can either overcome them and get back in the game, or sometimes it takes you to a new direction. Like you have to hang up your jersey, it takes some time, and then it's, hey, what am I going to do? Because when you get hurt, you go into a deep state of depression. You ever notice it's like you get hurt, you stress about, hey, what's wrong with me? And then you have that anxiety of, okay, the time between your MRI and when the doctor says you hurt your labrum, right. It's like the most intense time. And then you kind of go dark. But tell us about your journey.
Yeah, it was the uncertainty that really got me. My freshman year, my first injury was the right hip, and basically genetically, it was predisposed. It was a predisposition to the fact that my left one would eventually go as well. So after healing the first one fully, and it took about 6 to 8 months, it was almost like a ticking time bomb of, okay, well, when will the left one?
You put pressure on the other one while you were recovering.
Right.
So then it's kind of normal, like even with an ACL or whatever.
Exactly.
And the doctor told you that right away. The doctor said, like, in low likelihood.
Pretty much. Yeah.
It's like Shaner with this.
Yeah. Oh, Kyle with his shoulders. My son had a similar situation with congenital cshoulder dysplasia.
Right.
And he just dislocates his shoulders all the time. And when we had his first one, we knew his second one was going to be imminent. But yeah, that's really hard because, it's especially when you're a young person.
Yeah.
And your body is your temple, and you're as a man. I mean, I want to talk to you about the physicality of men.
Right.
Because I have 4 boys, and I know how critically important it is. I'm an athlete, female athlete,
right.
different design. But men really, I find, and I'd love for you to talk about this, they need to be physical. If my kids don't work out, they are bears.
My husband.
And they will be destructive from the time they were teeny tiny. I could set a watch to it. It's like, that kid needs to get outside or he's going to break my house.
Right.
And I don't think that changes.
No. And I think that that's more of the difficulty within the recovery process, because once you have that outlet taken away from you, right? Like when I was struggling or I had something go wrong with whether it was a personal relationship or something other, something else in my life that went wrong. My outlet was basketball. I would go to the gym by myself. I'd go to the park and just play or shoot or go lift. And then suddenly that's stripped from me, and it's like, okay, well, what other
That's your
outlets do I
therapy.
have? Exactly. It really was a form of therapy. And for a lot of athletes, we struggle with that, specifically men, where it's finding different ways to let your anger out, let your emotions out. And I found out in that time I was a writer. It's more of a softer, notion that men don't typically have, but it was healthy for me. It was a way to
An
get my
outlet.
emotions out without
Awesome.
having to speak up. And that's something that now, in retrospect, I wish I had earlier.
When
Yeah.
I was reading about you on your website, I just kept on getting hung up on man up because, like, people might say that to us. We're all athletes here,
Right.
suck it up or
Yep.
man up. But, like, being a guy and having to man it up all the time and not being able to show, pain or weakness or vulnerability because of the stereotype that you're a man. You got to
Right.
stay macho and masculine. And, you guys have a lot to live up to.
Absolutely. And it's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves. It's a lot of pressure that maybe could come from parents. It could come from coaches or even athletic directors sometimes. And it's really just I look at vulnerability as a strength. And if you can speak up, if you can find that inner fortitude to find somebody that you can confide in, it's powerful. But you're right. I mean, the stigma is certainly still there. But our mantra is don't man up, speak up, because it's almost more masculine to be able to find somebody to speak to. Whether I've been to therapy, I've been to virtual therapy, in-person therapy, and it doesn't always work for everybody. So when we say speak up, or when people read that, it's almost like you're directly correlating it to therapy. But that's not always the case. I found my saving grace in my teammates, the people who loved me and knew me for who I was. And I was able to have those more open, comfortable, vulnerable conversations with them,
Right.
even my coaches.
Yeah, no, yeah, and you know what? I think it's so important because I think I would call it like an inherent bias that like men are tough and they're going to handle things and they're going to fix things. And I was even I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about how there's a notion that women have an inherent value when they're born because they are going to be childbearing, right? So and men have to prove their wealth, their meaning their personal wealth. I'm not talking about financial,
Right.
like their personal reason. And that's really hard. And then the other thing that I think is really interesting is that like they were talking about the fact that because women have come so far, it's actually made it harder on men. And I see this with my boys. My boys, like couple of my sons have struggled with mental health. And it's because they feel like they have so much
Right.
that like, well, why aren't you using it all? Like, well, what you could be an athlete, you could be D1, you could be this, you could be that, you're smart, you're this. And that's a lot to live up to sometimes. I mean,
It
and
is.
I know who your family and your dad, being a coach,
Right.
very well known. I think not only in the community, but like
Your aunt is one of my
nationally.
favorite
I mean,
people.
Yeah.
a lot of people in your family have had some really, really strong resumes. And I know like my kids say that. I mean, how did that affect you growing up?
It was a lot. I definitely felt that internalized pressure that I put on myself, and I will say it didn't necessarily come from whether it be my aunt, my dad, my mom. Like they didn't put that pressure. You have to go play collegiate basketball. But I wanted it. And having had one of my aunts play at Michigan, the other one played at Stanford, and then eventually the Olympics. My
You
dad
have
played in
genetics.
college
You
as
have
well.
a
It's like-
DNA
Yeah.
blueprint that is shouting, come here.
Right. So eventually I was able to reach my goal of playing in college, but it really was my goal. They shaped my path for me and they pushed me, and I'm grateful for it because it's something I wanted, and if I didn't, they would also be okay with that. But at the same time, it's difficult because it's just a principle of success, and you basically get to define that yourself. And
There's
that's something
something-
I'm grateful for.
Something that I am just thinking a collaborative opportunity, which would be a big one, because it would be pounding on a lot of doors.
Mhm.
But, all three of my kids have played a D1 sport. They're all lacrosse players. The very first meeting that you have with the athletic department is with your athletic advisor and also a mentor
Mm.
that is already making your brain think about what am I going to do when I graduate from college and I put the lacrosse stick down or I put the basketball down? life after sports,
Yeah.
because what's the percentage of people really going on to play something after college? And if you don't start thinking about it before you graduate, there's a huge void in your
Exactly
life.
right.
But that's a coaching, mentor that is helping you think past, who maybe you've thought of yourself your whole entire life. Now you've got to put on your big boy, big girl pants and think about what you're going to be post college. So maybe you
Right.
could develop a relationship with every college across the.
Yes, we're
He's working on it, right?
I mean, because they need this. This
Yes.
is real.
Absolutely. And everybody needs it, whether you're a woman, a female, or a male. Everybody has a story. Everybody's going through something. And it's a universal message that there has to be enough resources for us. And the NCAA just put out a mandate that every school across the country now has to have some sort of a mental health program, which obviously it's a long time overdue. But
Right.
at the same time, at least we're moving in the right direction. And it's one step at a time. But going back to what we were speaking on earlier, the fact of, or at least the presence of coaching, I think that's sometimes coaches don't always understand the true impact that they have on the individuals that they coach, whether it's in a positive or a negative way. I've seen both. I've experienced both and lived through it. But I will never forget my college coach right before my surgery. He called my dad, waiting to see. I haven't even stepped on campus yet. He was calling my dad to make sure I was okay, how surgery was going, etc. And he cared about me as a human being, not
Very
as an
important.
athlete or a basketball player. I was Teddy as a human, and that was, I'll never forget it.
Stay
That's
human.
So yeah, that's
Exactly
that's
right.
That's why I wore the hat. That's why I did think about wearing the hat.
no, but that's so important to have a coach that actually believes in you start to finish, not just, oh, okay, he's hurt, next, who am I taking? I remember growing up and there were these twins, and they were great, my best friends, and they were both really incredible athletes. Well, the coach came and went, you know what, you're going to be my girl, and focused just on the one twin, even though
Wow.
the younger girl was better. And mentally over time, she just finally gave up the sport, even though she was better, focused on the one. And it completely changed her life because
Wow.
she dropped the sport and she didn't have the confidence to kind of excel in other things. And, you eventually find what your strong point is. But
Wow.
just hearing that over time, you're like, oh my gosh. And I've seen it in so many other instances when you have the coach that says, hey, you know what? You're who I'm going to take under my wing, and I'm going to make you something. I'm going to give you the confidence. I'm going to just every day, positive affirmations, and the other ones that aren't as good kind of just get shelved. And
Right.
it's all about mind, body, and soul when it comes to anything having to do with sports.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. And I can even say one of my proudest testimonies I'll give is the fact that I look at my college coach right now as one of my best friends.
Oh my God, that's
That's awesome.
amazing.
I was
That's
at an
great.
event in Pittsburgh for MensXMental, and I'm sitting there having lunch or having dinner with my coach.
That
And
is.
that's what I ask, or that's what I tell everybody.
That's why you committed there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You go where you feel the love, and
Exactly.
you must have felt the human aspect that he was bringing to the table.
Right.
you know,
It's not just a
very
4-year
important.
thing.
When I was thinking about it, I said, you take these high level athletes, they're in the game, they're the top of what they do. And you were saying before, the Olympics and varsity level, D1, everything. Then it's time you hang up your jersey. And then all of a sudden, do you find it like with people that you're dealing with, how do they find the direction and where to go? How do they find something that's satisfying? Because you've been in the forefront, you've been in the limelight. I feel like it's such a struggle after you're there to then try to find yourself, because you were so successful and now you're nothing. And there's so much depression that happens even with these Olympic athletes you read about.
Right. It's the transitional phase that really gets a lot of athletes. And whether it's by choice of no longer wanting to play, whether it's by injury, or whether it's just the natural progression of your career, eventually the ball will stop bouncing.
They need another
I hate when that
outlet.
happens.
Yeah.
You need another outlet.
Well, that's why so many do go to coaching. Like,
Correct.
and that's a really great natural transition that people make. But what would you say to somebody who's like, struggling with a coach, because sometimes you don't get to pick your coach, and you have coaches that aren't your college coach that's amazing and sees you as a human and does treat you like a utility and is like looking for the next best thing and you can be easily replaced. Like, what would you say to our listener that like is dealing with somebody that's not great?
Yeah. I've been there too. And it was kind of sugar coated because we won. So it didn't get the attention it deserved, at least internally. Personally, it wasn't really thought about. But I would say be you to your core and stick to your guns, stick to your values, because coaches try and influence you and maybe in a negative way. You know, I will say I don't really speak to one of my coaches, and it's not my choice. I would do everything in my power to form a relationship, but if I'm only looked at as a business opportunity, or if I'm only looked at as somebody who can now help the next generation, I will only help the next generation, not because of you, but because I want to help the next in line. And it's a difficult process. And honestly, with the transfer portals now, especially in college, if that coach is not for you, or he's not putting you in the best positions to succeed both on and off the floor or the field, you have to be able to pack up and go. And
Agreed.
it's just the true nature of college sports, even high school sports now. There are so many kids who are not comfortable in the places that they're at. And whether it's because of success or winning or just the overall relationship with the coach, not every coach is going to fit you, and not every coach will play you, or vice versa. And it's a difficult process to handle, even at a young age in high school, specifically because the parents definitely play a part in it as well. But you're not gonna.
It's part of your mission. Speak.
Yes.
You know, like it takes courage or stamina to actually stand up and go against the grain, and then you're rewarded. I feel like I know a lot of people that have gone in the portal, and it's a hard conversation to start.
Yes.
And it's stressful, and you don't want your teammates to think that you think you're better than them, and you don't want, you know, your coach to kind of be your enemy in the process. But I am very thankful for the portal. I mean, the portal also has some negative aspects to
Absolutely.
it, because you can, you know, all of a sudden get some big guns that are putting you 3 steps back on the bench.
Yep.
So it's a give and take. But from a mental health standpoint, not having to suck it up and stay in something that is destructive,
Right.
or that isn't going to fulfill what you're looking to get fulfilled in your 4 years that you've worked really hard to achieve.
Right.
Is
And I've heard a lot of men who have committed to a place or started their freshman year, and suddenly that coach was not the person that they thought he was or she was.
Surprise.
right. That's marriage too.
Exactly.
Sometimes, you know,
Oh,
it's,
geez.
I mean, not my husband. I mean, you know,
That's for another episode.
That's
but
true.
bump.
Well,
Sure.
tell us more about your, like, I looked at your website. It was so informative.
Thank
It's
you.
very cool. I loved flipping through it, and you had some really amazing athletes. Tell us more about yourself and your whole mission, and how people can get involved with working with you and your program.
And your
Absolutely.
sick swag.
Yeah, and I love your logo. We
Thank
need
you.
to hear all about
And your
everything.
event that's coming
Yes.
up with
Yes.
with the basketball.
Absolutely. Yes. So it started as a class project, actually. My sophomore year, before COVID hit, it was basically the task was to create some sort of a social media platform where you could bring light or bring awareness to something you really cared about. And having lost one of my friends to suicide my senior year of high school, that was something that I truly cared about. I wanted to make a change in. And at the end of the class, it was supposed to be shut down. And we all had gotten sent home from COVID, and I don't follow directions very well. So I kept it running, and I spoke with the professor, and he gratefully let me keep going. And now I kind of just put everything I had into it. So by the time my senior year came around, I was able to play in my first MensXMental event at Harvard. So it was a Harvard Babson basketball game, and probably my proudest and coolest moment to date. It was a sold out crowd. We had our signage everywhere. The Harvard team was fully involved. It was really incredible. And that's kind of just catapulted us to this next phase of my life, this next chapter after basketball, of
You had a job.
Exactly.
You had a
Yeah.
full-time career.
Exactly.
And-
Senior year was definitely a difficult time, but it was passion driven. And it was a mission, a movement that I was truly passionate about. I loved it. I loved every second of it, as much work that I put into it, and as much sleep as I lost.
Because you believe in it.
Yes.
And there's, you're helping people.
Right.
You know,
Thank you.
you're changing the course of people's lives.
And that's the goal. I mean, one of our mantras is one love, and it really relates to one life. If we can save one life, whether it be via events, awareness, giving these athletes a platform, that's a job well done, and that's a win in our book. I can sleep well at night.
The
So-
best ideas come from passion. My
Absolutely.
daughter survived a near drowning, so I started a nonprofit. So I understand that energy, and I didn't sleep.
Right.
I was up all night. I had both of these guys. This one dressed up in a penguin suit for me, for God's sake. She was Patty the penguin, and this one was
Mascot.
like literally with me for every event that we threw. But it was motivated by passion and love,
Yes.
and everybody that supports you, surrounds you, and bands with you, and elevates you. And that's what that to me is really like a wonderful place to be.
Absolutely.
I like that energy. I like the results that come from that energy. I just wish that I didn't run into kind of political problems,
Yep.
because I was up kind of against the American Red Cross. And we were trying to get people educated in how to, do CPR, but
Right.
without necessarily being certified.
Mhm.
So it was a different battle.
Right.
But what you're doing,
Are you coming across any challenges in your expansion of this mental conversation that's become thankfully more, socially acceptable? We can really talk about mental health and
Yeah,
that's
it's a hot
that's
topic.
really happened, in the last few years. And like, are there hurdles that or roadblocks that
Yeah.
you've had?
Originally, there were some roadblocks. It was right in the introductory phase of name, image, and likeness when that first got introduced within college athletics. And I remember my senior year, I first got a couple calls from athletic directors and basically NIL managers or directors from different schools. And as a nonprofit, you were always allowed to give these athletes a platform. They were always allowed to wear and represent gear and merchandise, but they didn't know that. So I knew the rule, I knew the legislation, and so on and so forth. So I stood my ground, and I was on these calls like, listen, go read Rule 13.9 or whatever it was. And they were like, okay, well, you're a nonprofit 501c3, so I stand corrected. And that was a proud moment for me, just humbling, and the fact that I can do this long term.
yes.
Because we had athletes from some of the biggest schools across the country, and now that their athletic department is calling me was a sign of, okay, well, you're doing a pretty good job if they're recognizing you.
That's
Is that how, say I was a football player and had mental health problems, and how do I find you, or how do you find me?
Yeah, so it's a whole multitude of different ways. Social media has been our biggest success point, whether it be Instagram, Twitter. I don't really enjoy TikTok very much.
I don't either.
I think
No.
it's poisonous.
We tried to do one at dinner.
We thought TikTok's time was up.
Yeah,
That
we
was
did.
one of our, we thought it was going to get the hook.
It still might.
Still
But,
might.
but
Yeah.
social media is like a main platform, and
Yeah, and we really want to. I recognize, and I've been in the athletes' shoes that we're dealing with, and we want to bring it to them. We want to see things from their perspective and meet them where they're at. So social media, everybody's on social media, especially this generation of athletes. That's almost a business opportunity right then and there. But it's also through our website. Our contact form has been sometimes overwhelming.
Did you see Noah Lyles, and all of his issues? I mean, I actually posted on Girls Gone Gritty. I mean, he's got anxiety, depression, ADD,
Dyslexia. Yeah.
dyslexia. He's got it all, but was still able to kind of probably find relief doing exactly what he does, right?
Exactly.
Because he could absorb himself and train really hard. But,
you kind of channel your energy into something, because you have so much pressure on you as an
Right.
athlete, especially when you're at an Olympic level or a
Yeah.
pro level.
Right.
Injuries, every obstacle that you could possibly imagine.
Yep.
And it's overcoming them and channeling that emotions to make you stronger, faster, better, and focusing on that event. And it's the time after the event where do you go? What do you do? Do we call you?
Right.
And what like, are you younger kids, older kids, or do you take everybody?
I think that's the coolest part about this mission. It's a message that reaches and spans across all athletes, all avenues of different.
You don't
chapters of
discriminate
careers. No,
at all.
It's obviously specifically for men at this point because it's a conversation we don't typically have.
Right.
But at the same time, I am building this blueprint that I can then replicate for a women's mental. And that's the long-term vision of it. But at the same time, being able to now have, it's obviously delivered much differently, but I coach middle school now. So I talked with these middle school basketball players, high school athletes now, collegiate, and then we're now at the professional level, which is, personally, it's my dream come true.
And if
You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
Thank you.
What about Marty Fish? Have you reached out to him? Do you know who he is? He
No.
was the first professional tennis player that actually, I want to say he pulled out of the US Open. I'm going to have to really remember what it was, but I feel like he was on the same page. He was one of the greats. He was top 10 and he had such severe anxiety
Wow.
and depression and just was a battle in his own head that he actually pulled out of maybe the semis.
Mm.
And he came back later with an organization that deals with people that are high level athletes that have mental health, almost
Wow.
kind of like Simone Biles, what she kind of did. She pulled out.
Right.
We talked about her last week. I mean, how strong it was mentally for her to make that decision.
Exactly right.
But Marty Fish, I just saw it was on Netflix. I feel like I watched it. It was awesome. And
How old is that? What age group would you put him
he was
in?
with Andy Roddick. I feel like that was his mentor, arch rival nemesis. They started training together in Florida. They played against each other. Marty obviously could beat Andy Roddick, but Andy's head was in the game.
Wow.
And he was interested in partying and having fun. And, he was just not as serious. And he went on to see Andy's career go through the stratosphere. And he was like, I used to beat this guy all the time. And what am I missing? Why can't I turn that switch on? So he decided to turn his switch on and he was killing it. And all of a sudden there was something going on with his, his control panel and he just couldn't. And it was probably the reason that the switch never was turned on, there's just something there that was out of his control, but he ended up doing what he's supposed to be doing,
Exactly.
and he paved the way for very high profile athletes to admit that they were struggling to the point where they pull out of the US Open and it's okay. And he's using his voice.
And it is okay. And I've recently spoken with Kevin Love, who also speaks on mental health. He was one of the first NBA players to powerfully and vulnerably open up fully. He has a great documentary as well, but he's now started the Kevin Love Fund, and it's absolutely incredible.
Great last name.
Yes. And that really it's no pun intended, but it really is founded in love and just love they really work with a lot of elementary and middle school, starting at the core of the problem. And just hearing his story, just hearing his passion behind it, it's really incredible. It's inspiring. And having listened to him speak on the anxiety attack or the panic attack that he had during a game, he took himself out of the game and went right to the locker room and really was struggling.
He
And
probably thought he was having a heart attack. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
panic attacks and anxiety manifest as something's wrong with my heart. I'm
Right.
going down.
Yeah.
It's real pain.
Absolutely. It's a scary feeling.
I feel like you're your own success story. What a better person to be representing because you've gone through your whole everything from
Thank you.
being the athlete, from the injuries to all of it, and discovering writing
Yes.
and then creating this wonderful mission, and you're spreading good vibes and you're changing people's lives.
Thank you.
And
It's
we're really excited to have you here today.
thank you.
So I have a question. I have a thought. So you're 24, 24.
Yeah.
So I think, do you have an opinion on the correlation or causation? I know you say you use social media a lot, but you're probably the first true adult generation that grew up you're the experiment.
Yep.
My son's your
Yes.
same age, my oldest. What do you think about that as far as it reflects mental health? Do you think that there's any correlation, causation? Do you think it's just kind of a perfect storm that happened? Like, what are your thoughts on that for our listeners?
Honestly, I'm worried for this next generation. I'm really worried because when I was younger, my childhood was go outside, grab a ball, play basketball, go be with your friends, have a play date or whatever it was. But it was never, I'm going to sit on my iPad or my phone all day and connect with people virtually. That was never like my outlet. So this next generation, it's scary. I think especially after COVID, we've lost a little bit of that connectivity. Even just being in person, and seeing it now with whether it be my middle school team or just the younger generation in general, even something as simple as eye contact.
Yeah.
We
Oh my
struggle with
God.
that. Having face-to-face conversations, personal skills, it's scary. I think we've lost that, but at the same time, I look at social media and I relate it to a refrigerator. If you open social media, you open a refrigerator, you get to choose what you take out. You can either take the apple, you can take a piece of cake. It's your choice, right? So there is a good way to use social media. And the way the algorithm works, which is very smart, they sometimes use it to their advantage, but the things you like, the things you see or rewatch or comment on or share or send, that stuff now you see more of it on your feed. So if I were to like something positive with mental health, motivational speakers, or whatever the case may be, I would now see more of that. It's kind of how our mind works, right? If you have all these negative thoughts, they kind of compound themselves.
Right.
So it's really interesting, but there needs to be some sort of an educational piece to it where kids are now learning how to use social media the right way, because there is a right way to do it. And I think there is incremental value that will
Social
come
media
from
is
it.
like something that you can actually major in college now.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's wild. I mean,
Yeah.
that's actually, you can go in that direction and that could be your major,
Right.
but it makes sense for this generation.
Right. And there's a business opportunity to it as well. I mean, even now with the NIL landscape in college sports, there can be a good way for it to be used. I mean, whether it be promoting somebody else's brand or promoting things that you care about, there's a good way for it. But again, it needs to be truly stated or taught, how to use it, when to use it, and all restrictions would be helpful as well.
Yeah,
I came
I
across
agree with you.
one of Jessica Seinfeld or Jesse Seinfeld, but her real name is Jessica. I was thinking of you. I was trying to prep, before this. And she said, after reading Jonathan Haidt's new book, The Anxious Generation,
Yep.
how the great rewiring of childhood is causing an epidemic of mental illness, I am convinced we are on a runaway train. She said, if you are the parent of a child, I highly recommend this book. Pre-order it now. It comes out in March. So we're past that. This book could change the world, but collective action is required. We must hold Meta, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc., along with Apple and Google accountable for age verification. The data on how destructive social media and smartphones are to teens and tweens is so damning. She said we all need to wake up and care about this.
Absolutely.
I mean, and that's it.
You're on the forefront of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how can everyone, all our listeners, give us all your Instagram handles, website,
Oh, and we need to talk about your basketball
and your basketball
event.
events, and your sneakers. But
Yes.
those
Yes.
are so
Sneakers are
fly.
Thank you. So the sneakers, the merchandise, even the cleats that we're now wearing with the NFL, from My Cause, My Cleats, that's all just a way to make mental health cool. I think for men specifically, if you have something that you can wear on a regular basis, it's just a stigma breaker. It's an icebreaker that you can just spread awareness in the same thing.
Hey, what does that mean? Keep,
Keep
it's
going. Exactly.
perfect.
On the inside, it says you're not alone. And that's the true message. So we're trying to intertwine that culture with an actual cause behind it.
It's great.
But MensXMental.org. All of our social media handles are MensXMental. And basically the event on January 25th will be at Red Bank Catholic. It's going to be a showcase, a second installment of our Men's Mental Showcase, where 3 games from teams across the state of New Jersey, and just bringing everybody together. There's 6 different teams, and we're all united for one cause, surrounded by one love, and that's truly the mission. That's the message. I will speak for a little bit, but just being able to, seeing last year the video and the content that came out from it, all of the teams, there were 6 different teams standing behind me as I spoke. And I got the chills speaking about it because that's why I do it. To be able to unite rivals or to be able to unite men who would never come together at any other point. It really keeps me going.
So can the general population get a ticket to this incredible event with these 6 teams?
Yes, they will be coming available for pre-order, I believe, in the next December, we decided.
December?
Yes.
And
that's
okay,
the
great.
1st.
What website can we get the tickets on?
MensXMental.org.
On your website.
On your
Yeah,
website.
okay.
Yes,
Well,
exclusively on there.
The Girls Gone Gritty, we have so much love. We have one love here. We can't
Absolutely.
thank you enough for being on the show.
Better
with
use your
us
voice.
today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're going to spread the love. Make sure all you listeners go to girlsgonegritty.com, and we're going to share lots of stories on there. And thanks again.
Yeah, and I want to personally thank you for being a voice for the boys, for my kids
Thank you.
personally, and bringing light to it because
It's real.
it's a real struggle and it's a real conversation, and having a face and a history that you have just validates so many people and
Thank you.
knowing that they belong.
Thank you.
So really incredible, and we look forward to hearing more about you, and we'll probably have you back in next iteration after you do some more of your fun stuff with all these pro teams and athletes and just human beings here on world. And stay human.
Thank you. Exactly right.
One love.
Yes. Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
You
so much.
inspire me.